Good afternoon. This is Eric Seal. I'm coming to you live, Last Day's Voice, bringing you the message of what is known as the sheep who are lost. Okay, we know that when false teachers are teaching false doctrine to to all those who are their parishioners and so forth, they are basically devouring the sheep. There's been so much false doctrine which has come in the last 2,000 years into the church that the sheep, or if you want to call them that, or the parishioners, the church's congregations, have become blind. It's very confusing out there in the false religious system. You go to the Methodist church and they preach one doctrine. You go to the Baptist church, they preach another doctrine. And then you go to the Assemblies of God, they preach another doctrine. As a matter of fact, the doctrine of the Assemblies of God has gotten so corrupt that the only thing that they can focus on anymore these days is the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. And then on top of it, they're even saying that you don't have the baptism of the Holy Ghost, evidenced by speaking in other tongues, in order to have regeneration of the soul and renewing of the mind, or what a lot of you people call saved. Okay. The regeneration of the soul and renewing of the mind was lost, back 2,000 years ago, after the last apostle died, which we're not exactly sure who it could have been. It could have been Hermes, it could have been Polycarp. We do know that John lived for quite a while, so it may have been John. But we do know that after the last apostle had passed on, the church became dim-sighted and blind concerning the true doctrine of Jesus Christ. And the thing is that Christ, when he came into this world, he brought his covenant with him. Okay, he sanctified his covenant through his blood. And he also fulfilled the Old Testament, all the Old Testament laws and the words of the prophets. So he confirmed all these things when he came here, or fulfilled all these things when he came here. Okay, and by doing that, he was able to bring in his covenant for us, where they have the regeneration of the soul and renewing of the mind. All right, to have his spirit within us, not with us, but within us. And his commandments for the church were handed down to his government, which was through apostles. Okay. The church today doesn't want apostles, because apostles threatens their doctrines, which are written according to their vain imaginations, their aspirations, and their principles. Okay. They want to use the moral code to justify their worship. And the moral code will only justify the fact that they're trying to correct themselves with the flesh. Okay? And not by having change through regeneration, by using the tools of the covenant of Christ. The moral code is preached in every church. Every church. Okay, throughout the world. Even, these, what everybody would consider extreme pagan churches. They all have some kind of morality or a moral code. Okay? And with this moral code, this is what they basically use as a standard, okay, for their righteousness. Now, this is the false standard. And by using a false standard such as this, it becomes false righteousness. Okay? It becomes self-righteousness. It becomes basically the actions of the flesh. And the thing is that people cannot change themselves into a righteous person in the eyes of God. They can't be the authors of their own salvation. They have to know the plan of God. And in order to know the plan of God, they have to go through God's government in order to learn it. But yet, the church is basically fulfilling a prophecy which was given by Paul, 2,000 years ago, which he said, the Apostle Paul said that in the last days people would heap up unto themselves teachers who would appeal to their itching ears. Well, we're seeing that right now. And a heap is no small measure. I mean, we're talking to be overflowing. So the false religious system out there is overflowing with false teachers. I know many of you out there are probably saying, well, okay, Paul prophesied that, but you want to know something? Somebody else prophesied that too. Somebody who was in the antediluvian age, all right? Somebody who was here before the flood. That person was named Enoch, okay? And Enoch wrote, the eyes of the sheep, he's talking about today, became so dim-sighted that they could not see, and likewise in respect to their shepherds. Okay, they could not see, and neither could their shepherds. And they were delivered to their shepherds for an excessive destruction, so that the sheep were trampled upon and eaten. Oh man, doesn't that kind of ring a bell? Think about that, because what did Christ say? That God would give them over to a strong delusion to believe a lie. This is a time of testing that we are in right now. It's a time of testing for the church and for the people of this world on whether or not you're going to continue to follow after your false righteousness, your false standards, your moral code, or whether or not you're going to throw away all of these frameworks of idolatry and embrace the knowledge of God for the regeneration of the soul and renewing of the mind. In order for you to do this, you have to come into the stewardship of true living apostles of Jesus Christ, such as Chief Apostle Eric von Endersek. If you do not do these things, then you won't have direction and function in worship. You won't know how to worship God, to receive the regeneration of the soul and the renewing of the mind. You have to understand that these false teachers, okay, they have fed you false knowledge that is based on the lust of your eyes and the lust of the flesh and the pride of life. Okay, all of these things appeal to the needs of your flesh. And all the needs of your flesh comes from fear, the fear of lack. Okay, fear you're not going to have enough. I'm not going to have enough gas. All right, I'm not going to have a good enough relationship with my wife or with my kids or with my family or with my coworkers or my boss. I'm not going to have a good job in order to make enough money. I'm not going to have the nice car that my next door neighbor has. I'm not going to have the nice house. All of these things are temporal. All right? And there's a lot of churches out there that focus on these things, like the faith cults, for instance. That's what I like to call them. You have these faith churches out there. The Assemblies of God are guilty of this. Foursquare Church has become guilty of this. Even some of the Methodist churches out there and so forth, the Church of Christ and the Church of God, they've all become guilty of this. The Christ Covenant churches have become guilty of this. I could go on of all the churches that have been preaching these false doctrines, these prosperity doctrines. Okay, this has gone on for quite a while, and these people have also sold you their poison. Okay, in books, tapes, and CDs, and by this they make merchandise of you. They get your money in their pockets. Okay, they take your money, they put it in their pockets, and they go out and use it for the lust of their eyes and the lust of the flesh and pride of life. Okay, in other words, they're devouring you. All right. Not only are they devouring you for your money, but they're devouring your soul also by leading you in false doctrine. Okay. Man, they've also robbed you through the tithe. Okay, that law is no longer in effect anymore. As a matter of fact, Christ had already fulfilled that through his sacrifice on the cross. All right, our tithe today is a reciprocation of God's knowledge back to Him. That's our tithe today. We bring the sacrifice of praise, and that's what the sacrifice of praise is what David was talking about. Okay, the sacrifice of praise is to bring the knowledge of God back to Him. Okay, and to keep these things, by doing this, we keep these things in our thoughts, in our minds, in our souls, in our memory. Boy, they have robbed you in that too, didn't they? They took your money in through the tithes. They have brought you into darkness through your own lusts. That's right. They've been preaching doctrines that appeal to your own lusts. These are known as the doctrines of devils, okay, or the doctrines of seducing spirits. They have left you basically with the false knowledge of this world to use for discernment. And, when you are in darkness, you cannot discern what is of God and what is not. As much as you would like to think you do, you cannot. All you can do is discern according to the standard which you already have. Now, if Christ is the light, and his commandments are to bring you light, then his commandments would not be focusing on your needs of the flesh. His commandments would be focusing on the needs of your soul, okay, for the regeneration of the soul and renewing of the mind. All right, that's what his commandments would be focusing on. And by this, as you study these things, the truth of the covenant of Christ, then you will have discernment. All right. They have also taught you how to take the name of God in vain and blaspheme him through false doctrines of men. All right. In other words, they've given you these false doctrines to use, and every time you turn around and worship God using these things in the name of God, you're taking his name in vain. Taking the name of God in vain has nothing to do with using God's name in a curse or basically a foul language. It has nothing to do with that. Okay? Blaspheming, the name of God, or taking the name of God in vain, means to create a framework that is outside of God's grace and truth. Okay, by creating that framework, you label it with the name of God. Remember what the commandments were before. Thou shalt not have any engraven image before you. Thou shalt not worship any false god. Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and only him thou shalt serve. See how all these things link together? Thou shalt not take the name of God in vain. In other words, don't use all these frameworks and so forth and create them and then put my name on them and say I gave them to you when I didn't. And then go and worship these things and use these things to worship me with, because I won't accept them. Okay, God will only accept those things which are his. And for you to know what is his, then you need to be instructed by true living apostles of Jesus Christ. And I recommend that you go to Second Eighth Week on the internet, second8thweek.com or Second Eighth Week Ministries. If you look it up on your browser, it'll come right up. Okay? Get enrolled now, because we are in the last days, the very last days. And the darkness of this world is going to envelop us even more. Okay? We're going to have more false doctrines and more false teachings, and the desires of the flesh are going to be strong these last days because there will be lack. And people are going to want ways to basically beat back lack in their lives so they can have more than what they have now. And to do that, well, they're going to be looking for teachings. They're going to help them to improve their abilities to get more from out of this world. Okay? So anyway, this is Eric Seal coming to you today with the message dealing with the blind sheep and the false teachers. And like I said, if you really, really want to know the Lord, you need to seek him with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. You need to cry out to him. You need to ask him for his baptism, the baptism of the Holy Ghost, evidenced by speaking in other tongues. You need to be instructed in the true doctrine of the covenant of Jesus Christ. And to find that, you can only find it through Second Eighth Week. Thank you very much. God bless.